Paper 1 is for 30 marks and it is 1 hour. 1 hour, 30 MCQs and 30 marks, right? Paper 2 is for 40 marks and paper 2 is for 1 hour, 30 minutes, right? It's known as data response and essay, right? And what it has, basically, it has two parts, two sections. Section A is case study, and case study, I mean, this case study is missing for some reason. No, here are the questions. So case study has different smaller parts, right? And the total marks for the case study are 20. Then in section B, there are 3 essay questions, and out of those 3 essay questions, you have to attempt one. And each essay question is for 20 marks. And that is divided in 2 parts. Each essay question is divided in two parts. The first part, A part, is for 8 marks, and the second part is for 12 marks, right? So as you can see, and out of these 3, you have to attempt one. So let's see if any of these questions is from unit 1. So let's see. And this is from unit 1, if we can find any essay questions. Right. No. Okay. This is a marking scheme. Right. Not really. Right. Okay, perfect. Right? So this is a question that we have done, right, in unit 1, right? So this topic we've already done in unit 1, so we'll do this one. Okay. Now here's the first question, students. Let me open my notes alongside, right? So I've shared all the notes with you. Where did it go? Right. So we can bring these two together, right? So this is economics 1. Right? Okay. Now the question here says, let me copy this and then we'll do on our sheet. Okay. So here's the question that we are about to do. Okay. Explain how capital goods contribute to production in a modern economy, right? And how capital is rewarded. Now, for students who don't know, yesterday we started our discussion, but we could not complete it. So we said that there are resources. Every country has resources. Every country has resources, and these resources, which are also known as factors of production, are used to produce goods and services, right? So you can't produce anything without the inputs, right? So resources or factor of production, as we say in economics, these are basically the inputs that are needed to produce goods and services. Yeah, we'll come to it, Zohan. Yeah, but you're correct, right? Now, all different resources are divided in 4 categories. So economists have divided all the resources in the world, because if you think about it, I mean, there's so many different resources. Let me give you an example. So if you just think of this phone that you're using, right? What inputs were used to make this? The plastic, the microprocessors, the camera, I don't know what technology was used, blah, blah, blah. Think about the table. That's simple. The table, the wooden table that you can see in your home, the furniture that you can see, that's mainly made out of wood. But there might be some foam used, there might be some paint used, right? And things like that. Think about the house in which you're living. In the house that you're living, that is made up of cement, bricks, I mean, obviously steel that is being used to, in the foundation of the house and so on and so forth, right? So there's so many different resources in the economy that it can be a little confusing. And that's why economists have divided all these resources in 4 categories, which we call as factors of production, right? So this was the question, but before we answer this question, this is the question that we're doing, right? So before we jump directly to the question, I know some students are new, so we are just explaining what these factors of production are. Now, you already are familiar with the word land, right? But in economics, it has a slightly different meaning. Land means any natural resource like coal, right? Wood, oil, chemicals, metals, right? So anything that's a natural resource would be defined as land in economics. This is making sense, right? Then the second thing, and obviously, and land itself, right? So it will include, all natural resources. Now, what is labor? Labor, as we know, normally labor is any, unskilled people working in a company, but that's not always the case. So in economics, we'll define labor, any human resource used in the business, right? So any human resource, any human being, right? Or you can more simply write this down as any human effort, whether mental or physical, used in a business, right? So any mental or physical effort that people are using in a business is known as labor. It includes both skilled and unskilled labor, right? Are you getting me? So both type of people will be part of the labor, right? Skilled and unskilled, right? Perfect. Now, what is capital? Now, this is interesting. A lot of students confuse capital with the finance, the money, right? Because normally we use the word capital like whenever we are sitting and we are just having casual talk, we say, "Oh, we need capital to start a business," right? But in economics, capital has very specific meaning, and that meaning is any man-made resource. So any man-made resource would be defined as capital, right? Now let me give you an example. So if you see around yourself, right, where you're sitting in your room, a lot of things, in fact, most of the things that you will see around you will be man-made, and therefore those are capital. The air conditioner in your room, the heater in your room, the furniture on which you are sitting, the house itself is man-made, right? The laptop that you're using, the phone that you're using, the notepad that you're using. So all these things are some things that were not naturally there, right? That did not exist naturally, and humans created those. Therefore, all of those things are capital, right? Including machinery I did not mention, right? Machinery, right? Furniture, laptops, computers, notepads, right? Anything, I mean, that is made by the man, right? Which is obviously not natural, that would be defined as capital. Is this making sense, Khadija? Right? So the finance that you need to start a business, right? That we will define as finance. That's the investment or the finance. You will not say it is the capital, right? So I'm emphasizing on all these different points because that is very important, because sometimes students still get this confused, right? So capital is man-made resource. The money that you need, the investment that you need, or the finance that you need, that is needed to buy all of these four resources. Is this simple? Is this clear? Now, the fourth and the last category of resource is enterprise or the entrepreneurs, right? Entrepreneur is a word that is very commonly used nowadays, and you know understood entrepreneur, a business person who takes the initiative, right, and right arranges other factors of production, right? So who arranges factors of production in business and takes the risk, right? So entrepreneur is a person, whereas enterprise is an organization. So if I say, in the case of Mega Lecture is the company, right? So Mega Lecture will be the enterprise, whereas the person who started that business, Sarfad, he is the entrepreneur. Are you getting me? So a business person who takes the initiative, arranges other factors of production, and takes the risk, right? So that's the definition of an entrepreneur. Any confusion so far? Now, let's go back to the question and see what the question was asking. So the 8 marks for this essay question said, explain how capital contributes to production in a modern economy and how capital is rewarded, right? Now, for each of these uh, resources, we know the compensation that they get. So what are the compensation that each of these resources get? Quickly, right? So resource and the compensation, right? So land, labor, capital, and enterprise, capital and enterprise, right? So land gets what? Land gets what, students? Land gets rent. When you know rent out any premises, right? It's a building, it's an apartment, it's a office space, whatever it is, you're paying rent. Labor gets what? Wages, right? So we will most of the time say it's wages or salaries, whatever, but we'll use the word wages here, right? Then for capital, what do you get? Interest. Why capital gets interest, I'll tell you in a bit, right? And enterprise gets what? Profit. So whatever you save at the end of the day, do you remember we were talking about this the other day as well? So revenue minus cost is your profit. So how much you generated from the sale of your goods, that's your revenue. how much was the cost of producing that, right? That's your cost of production or cost. And the amount that you save after paying your cost from the revenue, that is your profit, right? So the incentive that the business has to the incentive that the business person has to start a business is to earn profit, right? So that's why it's profit. Now, coming back to this part, why is capital getting interest? Now, you must have heard the term interest. So when you deposit your money in a bank, you get interest, right? So if it's a saving account, if you open a saving account in any bank in Pakistan, in any other country as well, for that matter, so you earn interest. Why is capital getting interest? Think about this. All these man-made resources that you get, right? So I was telling you that capital is what man-made resource. So you need finance. Technically, you need finance for all the other resources as well. But the money that you need to buy capital, so it's kind of borrowing. A lot of modern businesses, do remember, a lot of modern businesses take loans to start or to grow or to expand, right? Not all, a lot, I'm saying, right? So the money that you have borrowed from a bank, right, to buy all these different assets that you need. So why would you need to borrow money to start a business? Because you need to buy some office space, you need to buy some machinery, like machinery if it's a manufacturing business, or you might need to buy some equipment like the furniture or the laptops. So the money that you have borrowed from the bank, on that you'll be paying interest. Is this simple, students? Because obviously borrowing is never free, you have to pay interest. Any confusion so far? So for this question for 8 marks that says how capital contributes. So the first thing that you will do, what will you do? Now let's assume you're sitting in an exam and this is the question in front of you. How will you arrange, how will you, write the answer to this question? That's what I'm asking. So the first thing that you have to do is to define what capital is. So capital is any man-made resource, right? And you can give some examples, or that always helps, that is used in the production process, right? Now, depending upon the next thing that we'll say, depending upon the nature of product, the choice of capital goods will be determined. What do I mean by that? So think about agricultural production. Agricultural production would require what? Tractors, harvesters. What about insecticides? Insecticides, capital है या कुछ और है? Is insecticides, you would know what insecticides are, right? So the chemicals that you spray on your field to kill that, what is that called? To kill the insects. Is that capital good or what? Quickly, students, is that capital good or what? Is that land, Zuhan? Now that's a good question, right? So the capital, the insecticides, the chemicals that you spray on your, crops, is that capital good? Right? Why is that capital, Zuhan? Why is that capital? What about others? What are this thing? Because it's not made by it's made by humans, yes, right? Students, what is so complicated about it, right? So agar, if there is something that didn't exist naturally, those chemicals are not the normal chemicals that exist altogether, right? So these chemicals are mixed, right? So there is no worries, right? So there's a complete research that goes into determining that what type of chemicals will kill rats, what type of chemicals will kill insecticides and pesticides. So these are man-made items, right? So agricultural production requires these things. On the other hand, manufactured goods require machinery, right? What else? Computers. Can any modern business operate without computers, right? Furniture, right? Building where you're operating, right? Phones, right? Internet, right? So all these things are man-made and these are capital goods. Easy? Any confusion so far? Then you will say that capital is mixed with other resources. Now think about this. Capital on its own is also not enough to produce anything. Do you agree with me or not? Is capital enough to produce anything? Give me one example where you can produce something only with capital. No humans, no land, no enterprise, right? So it doesn't happen like that. No matter what type of business you think about, there will be some element of land being used, some element of labor being used, some element of capital being used, and some element of an enterprise is always there because there is someone who is starting the business. Yes or no? Right? So we need excellent, right? We need all factors of production to produce something. But yes, the mix can vary. The mix can vary. Some things are more labor intensive, as I was telling you when we talked about the types of economic systems, and some processes use more capital, right? So if you think of the agriculture sector in very advanced economies like USA and so on, right? So they use a lot of capital goods, very few people, but still you need a person to drive a tractor. You still need a human to operate the harvester. You still need someone to spray on the fields. Yes or no, right? So in every business, all four factors of production are used. So this is the next thing that we'll talk about. And then how is capital rewarded? So you'll say that capital is rewarded through interest, right? So the money that you have borrowed to buy all the capital equipment, because a lot of times you do not buy your own equipment, you rent it out. You rent it out or you take a loan, right? Are you getting me? So you rent out that equipment and the money that you have borrowed that from a bank. When you take a loan from a bank, you pay interest on that, right? So that's the compensation. Just like when I'm working at Mega Lecture, what do I earn in return? I earn wages. If Mega Lecture is operating in my building, that building is owned by me. What will Mega Lecture do? They will pay me rent, right? Obviously, it's not free, right? So similarly, if someone is providing finance to a business to buy capital goods, that person will be paid interest. Easy, right? Very nice. And whatever is left at the end of the day, after all the cost has been paid, that is your profit. Good, easy, right? Now, this being said, so this is what you were supposed to do in the first 8 marks question, which was very simple. Define capital goods, give some examples, right? Tell what is the compensation of the capital, right? And tell that capital is contributing to the modern economy, that you mix capital with other resources to produce a product, right? Okay. Now let's come to the B part. Discuss whether enterprise is crucial to the outward shift in production possibility curve in a mixed economy. Now, these are the type of questions that I wanted you to get some practice of. Now, in one question, it has used mixed up a couple of different concepts. So it's asking you how enterprise is crucial for the outward shift of production possibility curve in a mixed economy. So for students who don't know, who missed out on what production possibility curve was, let me give you a quick explanation and then we'll move forward. So yesterday we talked about basic economic problem. What is basic economic problem? You have limited resources, unlimited wants. Yes or no? So every country has a limit to how much it can produce. Now, as I said, on production possibility curve, you show this problem. On production possibility curve, you show the concept of basic economic problem. How so? Let me tell you. So it is a graph. I'll also write the definition for you. You don't need to worry, right? So it's a graph. Production possibility curve is a graph that shows the maximum output of two goods that a country can produce. So let's say you have quantity of cars on the y-axis, you have quantity of cars on the y-axis, and you have quantity of some other good on the x-axis. Let's say wheat, right? Now, how much quantity of each of these two items, right? How much quantity of these two goods you can produce is basically shown on the PPC, right? Now have a look at this. Now, the production possibility curve is a normal downward sloping curve like this, right? It's a normal downward sloping curve like this. Anything crucial, I'll come to it. Zohan, just give me a second, I'll come to it, right? So any point within the curve or any point, let's first see what this point is showing. So far I've told you, Khadija, since this is your first time, do let me know if there's anything, any topic, any word that you're finding difficult, right? So production possibility curve, right, is a graph that shows maximum output that country can produce in terms of two goods. Simple, easy, right? Any confusion about this, right? Right, okay. Now, any point, which I will show you in a bit, within the curve shows that the country is not fully utilizing its resources. Why so? I'll tell you, right? So any point within the curve shows that a country is not fully utilizing its resources. Any point on the curve shows full employment resources, right? And any point outside the curve is not achievable. Why so? I'll tell you. Okay, students, let's go back and see what we meant in each of these cases, right? Now, the first one I said that any point within the curve shows you unemployment of resources. So let's say you're operating on point A. Let's say Pakistan is operating on point A. Now, point A shows that you're producing 10,000 cars in entire Pakistan during a certain time period. And let's say you're producing 15,000 units of wheat. 15,000 kgs, you can say 15,000 tons, you can say, but whatever it is, right? 15,000 units. So K stands for thousands, right? So this is point A, if a country is operating on point A. Now, if you move from point A to point B, which is on the curve, now you can see for yourself that point B is higher than point A. It's higher than point A. What do I mean by higher? It means when you go from A to B, you move right on the x-axis, you move right on the x-axis, and you move up on the y-axis. So obviously the quantities for both the products will increase. Now let's say you're making 15,000 cars at point B and you're making 20,000 units of wheat. Yes or no, right? So you have yourself seen that point A was a level of lower production, point B is a level of higher production. So that's why I said that any point within the curve, whether it's A or it's C or it's D or it's E, right? So all these points are within this boundary, not on the curve. So any point within the boundary is showing you unemployment of resources. Khadija, is this clear? And similarly, any point outside the curve is not achievable. How do we know it's not achievable? Because the very definition of PPC says, the very definition of a PPC says that it's the graph that shows the maximum output that a country can produce. So how come? Very nice, excellent. So how come any point outside the curve would be achievable? But this is not all. This is not all. There is more to it. Now let me show you. Now, when a country discovers more resources, I'll tell you, right? Sometimes what happens, you discover more resources or the quality of your resources improve. How so? I'll tell you in a bit. Then your PPC shifts outwards. Then your PPC, the entire curve, as you can see, the one that I'm making in front of you has shifted outwards. Now, previously you were not able, the country was not able to operate on in this region, but now you can, because previously your PPC was this purple line and now it is this pink line. Yes or no? Now, what are the factors that cause PPC to shift outwards? Those who already know, quickly. So what factors cause an outward shift? This is good exercise because we're also able to revise. Students who have already covered these topics with me are also able to revise and recall what we did in the class, right? Okay, now discovery of natural resources, very nice. I'll be writing all of this in bullets, right? So I'll keep giving you examples as I write each one of these. Discovery of natural resources. So what happens, obviously over years, countries discover more natural resources. There were rumors going on, I don't know if that's correct or not, that Pakistan has discovered one of the largest coal reserves in the region, blah, 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 and so on, right? So this is what discovery of natural resources is, right? Then you have, there was another point, right? Productivity, new technology. Okay, I just explained you this production possibility curve, a graph that shows the maximum output that a country can produce in terms of 2 words. So this graph that I've made in front of you, that is your PPC, right? The entire story that we just discussed, right? Production possibility curve. So PPC, production possibility curve, the graph that shows the maximum output that a country can produce in terms of 2 words. Right? Okay, yeah. So PPC is the short form, right? Or PPF. Sometimes you also call it PPF, which is basically production possibility frontier, right? PPC, right? So I mean, as I said, there will be a couple of terms. Production possibility frontier. Never get confused. One of the two terms will be used in the questions, right? But they mean exactly the same thing. We good? Okay. Now, why would PPC, why would production possibility curve shifts outward? Because you have discovered more resources, more educated, trained labor force. Think about this. If people in your country are becoming more educated, obviously they will go on to starting more businesses, they will go on to doing jobs where they will add real value to it, right? And things will boom, right? So with more educated and talented or trained workforce, you can produce more goods and services. That's why your entire ability to produce will shift outwards. Previously, you were just able to produce within this region. You were able to produce within this region, but now with more resources, more trained people, you can produce more. So your PPC has shifted outwards, right? Easy. Now we are discussing what are these factors that cause an outward shift. More educated and trained labor force, discovery of natural resources, more advanced technology, as Johan was saying, like what is that called? New technology, more advanced technology, right? Which will increase productivity. Yesterday we talked about the word productivity, yes or no? Right? Productivity means how efficiently you're producing something. More advanced technology, right? And so on and so forth. Can we say that increase in working population? Yes, that will also cause increase. More people, more population, more workforce is a better working population is the word for that, right? So sometimes think about this. So the countries that are producing more in the world, like India, China, and so on, right? So one reason why they are able to produce so much more is also due to the fact that they have huge populations. With huge populations, they have more people to work. And therefore, right. So they have more working population. Got it? Easy? Any confusion so far? For this, birth rates, death rate should be higher. No. Death rate should be lower. So overall population, working population is a different thing. Working population is any person between the, like not everyone in this country can work, right? So, I mean, anyone below the age of 18 is not part of working population. Anyone above the age of 60 is not part of the working population. So people in your country who are between the ages of 18 to 60, only they are part of working population. Obviously, high birth rates help because if you have young population like Pakistan, India and China, not China now, but India and Pakistan, then you have, more people to work because more young people, right? Are we getting this? So students, these are all the factors that cause PPC to shift outwards. Now we'll quickly discuss. Khadija, did you follow this? Similarly, it's not always that the country will produce more and more. So it's not always that your PPC will keep shifting outwards and outwards, right? Sometimes your PPC can also shift inwards, right? Sometimes natural calamities happen, sometimes unfortunate events happen, and which I'm about to tell you in a bit, right? So your PPC can also shift inwards. What about those retire and start their own business? Does they count in working population? They do. They do. They do. Right? Because they're available to work. They're available to work. Yeah. Yeah. But that's the rough estimate. That's the rough estimate, right? Easy? We good? So anyone who is above the age of 60, but who would still be working in a country, that person either working on their own business or employed somewhere, because we see a lot of people above the age of 60 who are still working, right? In the private sector, I mean, there's no requirement, age requirement as such. So they are still part of the working population. That's correct. Okay, can we move on? Now, as I was telling you, just like the PPC can shift outwards when you have more resources and everything, the PPC can also shift inwards, right? When some unfortunate events happen. What factors cause an inward shift? Now, what would an inward shift mean? Inward shift would mean that your ability to produce is decreasing. Just like with an outward shift, your ability to produce was increasing. With an inward shift, as I've shown you, it shows that your ability to produce has reduced. Exactly, right? So what factors will cause an inward shift? First one, natural disasters. Think about it. What happens when a severe natural disaster, severe I'm talking about, right, hits a country, right? So some of it's, there might be some deaths, there might be some casualties, and there might be loss of land. Agricultural land is sometimes, that with flooding, the fertility of the agricultural land is affected and things like that, right? Houses might be destroyed, machinery might be destroyed, factories might be destroyed, right? So natural disasters like that. Similarly, people leaving a country. So as I was just telling you, working population of a country leaving the country to find employment in other countries. Right? Why does this happen? Because obviously in their own country, the wage rates might be low, like in developing countries like of Asia, usually wage rates are lower for a lot of occupations. So what people do, people migrate or go to other countries like Western countries and European countries to find work, right? To find employment in other countries. Easy? We good? Any confusion so far? What else? Zohan, do remind me that I explained you some other class that it's not the recession. So when there's a recession, in fact, let me explain you right now. With recession, it's not the entire PPC that shifts to the left. What is the recession, students? Recession is basically what happened in pandemic. What happened in pandemic that, there was a pandemic going on and it was a health emergency across the globe. So people could not go out, people could not do the shopping, restaurants were closed, shopping malls were closed, parks were closed, cinema theaters were closed, right? Stadiums were closed, everything was closed, right? So coming back, it's not that your ability has been affected. John, listen to this carefully. It's not that your ability to produce has reduced because all the resources are already there. I mean, some people, did what should be said. Some people did lose their lives in the pandemic. I'm not saying that we did not lose population. Every country lost population, right? But other than that, ability to produce, I mean, technically you can say, my bad. Yeah. So if it's a pandemic, then yeah, in pandemic, your ability to produce will reduce because if people are losing their lives, I mean, then you have less population available, right? Right. But otherwise, normal recession would not cause the PPC to shift inwards. In fact, it will cause you to move from a point on the PPC. So if let's say this purple line was your original PPC, so it will cause you to move from a point on the PPC on the curve to a point within the curve. So if you're operating on point A, where you're producing more output, now with more people, yeah, structural unemployment, I got your point, right? So with initially, let's say you were making 10,000 units of cars, right? This country was making 10,000 units of cars. I think that is a mess, right? So you were making 10,000 units of cars and let's say 15,000 units of what is that called? Wheat, right? Now, when you move from a point outside on the curve to a point inside the curve, right? Uh, your production levels will decrease. Your ability to produce is still the same. Zain, Khadija, right? Did everyone get this? So your ability to produce is still the same, but now since for some reason you're not producing as much you used to, right? So that's why you will move from a point on the curve to a point within the curve. Easy, right? So these are some of the reasons. Right, right. But in pandemic, yeah, in pandemic, you're right. So if it's a recession due to pandemic that people are losing their lives or, something of the sort, then the PPC will shift inwards. That's correct. Right? Confusion, students? Okay, now let's go back to the question for the remaining time. Let's see what was the question. Whether enterprise, we just discussed what an enterprise is. Enterprise is the organization that arranges other factors of production and takes the risk, is crucial. Crucial just mean important. Crucial just mean important to the outward shift in the production possibility curve in a mixed economy. Now you have to know a couple of things in this question. First of all, you need to know what mixed economy is, right? We discussed this the other day that mixed economy is an economic system where there is presence of both public and private sectors, right? So public sector is producing public goods, private sector produces private goods. You already know the difference between public goods and private goods. In fact, we did some MCQs yesterday as well, right? Then in this question, first of all, you define mixed economy like the way I did. Then you'll explain production possibility curve. Khadija? Is this clear? So you will explain that PPC is a graph, production possibility curve is a graph that shows maximum output that a country can produce in terms of two goods. Now, when the question says, so what question is saying in simple words? Why is enterprise important? Crucial means important for the outward shift of the PPC in a mixed economy. So imagine a mixed economy. All the countries, like majority of the countries in the world, I said, are mixed economy, like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Saudi Arabia, UAE, all these countries, right? So if your PPC is shifting outwards, you already know that it would be because of these reasons, discovery of natural resources. Now, obviously, discovery of natural resources is not in the hand of enterprise. Enterprise is not responsible for discovery of resources. Some businesses are, obviously, if your business is about mining business, right? Then it will be. But how enterprise directly, contributes to outward shift in the PPC is by having more trained and educated labor force. With more trained and educated labor force, and similarly with using more technology in your businesses, that would cause an outward shift. Supply to be increased, causing the price of goods and services increase. Encounter, it will cause the supply to be increased. Yeah, supply is increasing. So supply increase will increase the price of the goods. Zohan, think again. Why would the supply reduce? Thank you. Okay. Now, students, it's less than 1 minute left. And I think that, it would be too much if I go in the speed and that would not help, right? So we'll continue from here. In fact, let me highlight this question. So we will continue from this question tomorrow, right? And then we'll move forward. So we'll discuss it one more time. We have done some new things. We have revised some. For some students, it was new. For some students, it was kind of revision, but it's good that we have done. So we'll spend few more days to do some past paper practice, MCQs plus essay questions, and then we'll move on to the unit 2, right? Thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow at the same time. Have a good night and see you then. Allah Hafiz.